But yeah, welcome. Thank you so much for being here on this rainy Friday day in the Twin Cities. My name, as you heard, is Ricardo Perez. I use he, him pronouns. And for almost 4 years now, I've been working with the Blue Line Coalition and the Alliance. The Blue Line Coalition is a team of around 12 organizations. And I say around because sometimes that changes with some changes, whatever. But today is around 12 active organizations who gather monthly to talk about the opportunities and risks that entail designing and building a train through the corridor of the Blue Line extension. But before I jump into anything else, we wanted to share a video with you that we produced last year that in a way shows you why we do the work we do and why we fight the fight we fight. And this is not for the train, but for Blue Line Coalition, it's about the people. And the video that we wanted to show you kind of like shows you those, it's like a collage of the corridor of the communities that we're connected with. So Yuki, I don't know if you can maybe share your screen and play the video.
All the bad stuff that do happen here, we still have some great people that come out of these places. We call it the ghetto, the trenches, the hood, whatever you want to call it, that aspire to chase their dreams and be something and actually put a staple in the city.
We're still growing and still learning how to support our own people and how we want our community to look.
These are people who sometimes have to face being underrepresented in their community and feeling like they don't always have a say because they're renters and they don't own property. And we make sure that their voices are heard, that they're considered in the policy-making process, and that they truly feel a part of their community.
Lo que me gusta más de mi comunidad es que es una comunidad multicultural.
The people that I see around me are people who look like me and make me feel included in the community.
Somos un grupo que trabaja duro, damos todo lo que tenemos de nuestras personas.
Se llama la línea azul. No sé si han escuchado de este proyecto de tren.
Creo que somos una parte muy esencial que envuelve a todas las comunidades de diferentes culturas.
We enjoy being able to work with people in our community, with political representatives, and connect them to community members in order to work together to better our community and make sure everyone has a voice in it.
This is our community. We're going to stay here, and we need to be prepared for whatever's coming our way.
So before I pass the mic to our lovely panel that will be able to tell you more about this vision of abundance, we wanted to, emphasize the fact that you saw all those people in that video, right? And a lot of the times when we're engaging community around a train or situations, we always tell them about the bad, right? We tell them there's not enough time, not enough resources, that we don't have enough for us, So we intentionally want to flip that around and to ask people with an abundance mindset, how can we solve displacement? How can we build a train? Or how can we have a city that we feel proud of and that it meets our needs, So next, and in that vision of abundance, for us, it's very important to do art. If we're not doing art when we're talking with community, we're failing to talk to community the way they deserve to be interacted with. So all that being said, we're friends with a great poet who will share a poem on abundance. And Isabel, thank you so much for your time, but I'll pass you the mic. Please introduce yourself and thank you so much for your help today.
Payus, Nola is Venezuela. Very happy to be here with you guys. Real quick before I do the poem, I do this exercise in person, and I kind of want to do this in Zoom and see how it goes. If everybody could put on their mics if they can. If there's not too much room, if there's not too much noise, just turn on your mics for a second Promise you won't have to speak too much. But I want to do an exercise that I usually do, and hopefully you guys it can work out in Zoom as well. So when I say life is sacred, and we all say, I am sacred. So can we do that?
Can you repeat that? I didn't quite get that.
Yes, so I'm gonna do a real quick exercise of that I usually do in person. So when I say life is sacred, we can all say, I am sacred. All right, so everybody with their mics on real quick. Okay, life is sacred.
I am sacred.
Life is sacred.
I am sacred.
Life is sacred.
I am sacred.
All right, Bayus, thank you so much. If you don't get anything, I hope you guys leave with that at least, because I really do believe that once we understand our worth as humans, we can heal the planet so much more, and on all the projects that we do. And so I wrote this poem when I went to a conference with all the amazing Indigenous leaders of mine. It's called Father Sky and Mother Earth, and it's based on the Dene creation story, the duality of one creating something. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. Hear my heartbeat. When it runs out of time, it will never run out of life. It will be present through eons of pulses. No social construct or colonized existence will ever take away the humanity that still beats through the airways of Father Sky and the roots of Mother Earth. These entities do not exist to take up space, but to hold it. Ever expanding existence. We were meant to grow without a sense of limitation. Does not even compare to the Western word occupation. They both laugh at the idea that men choose believe that they can own land, as if they invented the idea of space, that every atom is subjected to monopoly, that when it bends and folds into new elements every second, its only value is to become a wasteful product. You cannot put a price on life. Going as far as to name the stars without being in touch with the ever-expanding stardust that we are all a part of. When you look around into nature, you realize blue and green are not just colors, they are signatures. I love you from the sky and the earth, a beautiful base to curate the fruits of their love, abundant examples to learn from the traveled waters that touches the north to the south of the globe, to the ecosystem that maintains its balance. The sky and the earth do not hold its elements to be defined as a commodity. Our ancestors' practices were taught through the balance of their duality, always humbling to stay quiet. In the presence of the greatest teachers to life, the laugh of our heartbeat spoke with the same whisper present in the roars of the seas, the breath one takes when we made it up to the mountaintop, the same air that sways between the trees. So when this way of life was threatened, it was possible for us to go extinct. The sky and the earth still replayed our heartbeat songs, remembering the years where these hymns would echo on within the next generation. So when the white men came and tried to proclaim their ways onto the land, they will never understand the extent of the space. The earth and the sky already had their names, their arms wide open to the lineage of our people, stories imprinted into the sky, guiding us like the North Star of the songs that we carry on. Even after the attempt of genocide, we are still here, more than just alive. But we are living spirits of Father Sky and Mother Earth, because we dare to root our humanity into nature's embrace, because we dare to write poetry as our creation story, because we dare to believe in an essence that cannot be defined by man-made measurements. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the poem.
Thank you so much, Isabel. That was very beautiful and wonderful, and I'm hoping we can capture it in the one pager that we're gonna produce, so this sentiment carries us through. So thank you so much. All right, so taking a deep breath and moving from this, art moment, I'm very excited to introduce you to our panelists this morning. And I'm hoping that you can introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns, your role and your organization. So all that being said, let us go into introductions, and I'm hoping maybe Candy, are you there? Would you mind going first?
I am here. My name is Candy Bacon. I live in North Minneapolis. I've been here on North Side for about 17 years. Currently, I am the MICAH Blue Line Outreach Organizer, and also the MICAH the MICAH Minneapolis chapter.
Thank you, Candy. And Jose, would you mind going next?
My name is Jose, and I am the Executive Director at Our Streets Minneapolis. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm glad to be here to talk a little bit about the transportation lens of the work that we're doing the Blue Line Coalition.
Thank you, Jose. And Felicia?
Peace, everybody. My name is Felicia Perry. I'm the Business and Commercial Real Estate Manager at an organization called Partnership and Property Commercial Land Trust. I'm also a longtime Northsider. I've been a resident here for almost 40 years now, and also a resident who lives right along this route here of the Blue Line. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Felicia. And Karla?
Hi, everybody. My name is Karla Arredondo, and I'm the director for Pueblos de Lucha and Esperanza. And like Felicia, too, I've been a Northside resident since I was 10 years old. We've lived in a multifamily building in Near North, and now I own a home in the Jordan neighborhood. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Karla. So let us get into the substance, into the questions, and let us begin now. So before we jump into the abundance, we felt it was important to contrast the current reality which some of our communities are experiencing in the corridor where the Blue Line extension is aimed to go through. So we're wondering if you can help us understand why is abundance needed? What are some of the issues that you know our communities are enduring currently out there in community? So following that order that we use for intros, maybe we can follow that as well. So Candy, would you maybe share a bit about some of those things that we're kind of like trying to put out there right now?
Sure. I think more about the history of the Blue Line. When it was scheduled to go down 55, I got involved because they were going to shut off Bryant. And this was about, almost 20 years ago that they had proposed the route. And they had proposed different routes along the corridor in Minneapolis. And so people got involved, people got concerned. Let's see, one of the reasons why I got concerned also is because I wanted to make sure that this Blue Line, this extended Blue Line, was about the people. It had all the amenities, it had all the goodies that we deserved in this community.
Thanks, Candy. And then next, Jose, I don't know, like, for example, based on your experiences with Our Streets campaign, I don't know if you want to share perhaps some of the issues that you have picked up currently exist out there in contrast of that abundance that we want to highlight, right?
Yeah, if it's okay, I'll share a little bit of content and talk a little bit about those things. Let me go back to the let's see. Is it possible to be co-host so I can do a content share?
Yeah, I think that
you can share your screen now.
Okay. And alrighty. So just a few things. We do work in North Minneapolis and primarily along also Memorial Highway, in addition to being part of the Blue Line Coalition. And we've partnered quite a bit with Harrison Neighborhood Association and Urban Homeworks and Heritage Park Neighborhood Association on that work. And so we had developed some graphics that I think might be useful regardless, even though this talks about Olsen Highway, if you look at the slide itself, this is part of a Vision Zero crash study at the city of Minneapolis. I know it's tiny to look at, but if you look at the corridors in North Minneapolis where the route is proposed, Broadway is considered a high injury street, which is some of the highest crash rates in Minneapolis, which is very consistent with a lot of county corridors. Another way of saying it's not safe for people who are using other modes of transportation, in particular walking or rolling, because of the design itself of the corridor. And so it leads to the highest number of fatal crashes, the highest number of injuries on that corridor. So that's something that's important to point out, is that in terms of their design, these corridors lend themselves to a lot of injuries and put the community members at risk. And the other thing is that, again, these were sort of built in and around Olsen, but because of the enormous amount of transportation infrastructure that's been built around North Minneapolis over the years, these areas have the highest asthma hospitalizations by zip code in the metro area, the highest number of households without car access, meaning that a lot of these roads as they are don't really serve the people who live there because they cannot afford to purchase cars. It is also true that the community members are some of the most economically burdened, and because of that exposure, I don't have a heat index map here, but it's because of the highways and some of these county thoroughfares, the heat index is much higher. Life expectancy in these areas is much lower. And so, as we've been talking about, this disproportionately impacts people of color who live in the community, and in these concentrations sort of create an issue where the pendulum's swinging it in the wrong direction, and having an option like a light rail could be beneficial, so as long, of course, as if it's done to the benefit of the community members, and as we've been talking about, with input from the community members who have been most negatively impacted.
Thank you, Jose. So next we have Felicia, and the questions on the chat as well, if you need to reference it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So to answer the question around share scarcity that our community is currently facing and why abundance is needed. I feel like I'll first say that I don't feel like abundance is needed. I think abundance exists. There's an access thing. We don't all have abundance or have access to this abundance, right? In North Minneapolis, it's not, I mean, people say food desert, but we experience a food apartheid. It's not that there's not an abundance of fruits and vegetables on this earth that could feed people. It's, you know, our access to the things. We just had another grocery store leave, right? So I think it's an access thing. I think neighborhoods like ours have historically experienced large transportation development projects getting the short end of the stick, right? We didn't get access to the abundance that's created. No one's going to invest billions of dollars into a development project if they're not expecting quite a big return on that investment. This is going to make money. The Blue Line extension is going to make a lot of people a lot of money. How do we get access to that abundance? There's no budget for this, you know what I mean? So I just think it's more of the mindset of abundance of the community when we are approaching things like this. The more that I learn about where the money goes, not even like, I don't know, people, they don't actually worry so much. I mean, we don't have to worry about where it's coming from. The money's gonna come. They're already raising money for this project. It's really, how do we get access to that abundance of resources that this project will attract? And not that it's something that happens to us. How does it happen for us, with us? which has been the challenge, right? So I think really acknowledging that historically and even presently, we're not experiencing this development project really good. We're not experiencing it as a community, the abundance that's already being created, right? Jobs are already being created from this project, you know what I mean? So we haven't gotten access to that abundance. So I think that's kind of what I wanted to elevate. And I guess more so to sort of frame it around the work that I currently do in commercial real estate. My job really, like the goal is to get BIPOC entrepreneurs and business owners access to a wealth building tool, which is in this case, commercial real estate ownership. And as that video we watched that Ricardo showed us, one of the first things that stood out to me in that video is just acknowledging that so many of the people here are not experiencing the abundance. And these are the folks who happen to rent rather than own the places in which they live or even run and conduct their business. So just kind of acknowledging that and setting the tone there as I talk about abundance is that it already exists. It is there, and we deserve and we have a birthright to be able to access that.
Thank you, Felicia. I know that's extremely on point and super wise, because yeah, you're right. Like, we don't have scarcity because abundance doesn't exist, because it's by design that we don't have access to that. So that's extremely powerful. Thank you. And I'm hoping maybe, Karla, can you maybe add more about, like your own experience and understanding about how people are, enduring or the things that you see where you're sitting or standing, with Pueblos on this first question here. And again, it's on the chat too, so.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off of Felicia a little bit too, of her saying like there is abundance, but the reason is we don't have access to us. And part of that reason is because we don't know about it either. Communities aren't getting engaged a lot through this project. I would say when I came on board with the Blue Line Coalition, I was living, or my home was off one of the proposed routes, and I hadn't even heard about the Blue Line project. So imagine me being 1 block away from the proposed lorry route, not even finding out until I joined the Blue Line Coalition, saying like, hey, this project's going to be happening. This huge project's going to be happening. It's going to be running from North Minneapolis up to Brooklyn Park. And at that time I was like, okay, well, if I don't know about it, I'm sure my neighbor doesn't know about it. I'm sure some of the business may not know about it. And it's that whole idea of like, there needs to be more engagement, more authentic engagement on this project, meeting folks where they're at, whether it's going to the business, going to the churches, going to the schools where folks meet, I think is really important. And that's a lot of what Pueblos is trying to do with this project, to make sure there's a big Latino population over North Side. I attend Ascension Church that's right off of Broadway and right behind the Cubs in North Minneapolis. I'm not very good with directions.
DuPont.
Oh, thank you. DuPont. And so it's like, still some of the folks I talked to at that church, they're like, I didn't know this project. Well, what does it mean for the businesses on Broadway? What does it mean for homes on Lindale? Like, have they spoken to them? Have they talked about like the impacts before construction, during construction, after? And for me to have the privilege of joining and doing this work, like that was easy, but for other folks, that may not be the case. So what engagement are we doing to make sure all of our communities are aware of this project, getting access to that abundance, in contributing their input to saying like, this is my abundance. What more do I want to see this? What do I want to make sure that stays in my community? I don't want it to change for this project. Like I wanted to have more things improved, or I want to have more things. Like Felicia was saying, some of the businesses haven't had any investment in it, and it's time now that we really take care of our community, really take care of our businesses, of our people here on the North Side.
Thank you, Karla. And again, yeah, for us at Blue Line, it's not about the train, it's about the people. And that really is, the heart of things. And let us, look at things differently. So yeah, thanks for sharing y'all about kind of like the current state of things or your experience kind of like looking at this initially. And now, like tapping into that existing abundance that is out there. One of the things that we know about constructing a light train is that it brings destruction. We know that the street will be turned out, excavated. There's going to be a lot of construction happening for a long period of time. And a lot of the times, like they tell us that it's like surviving construction, right? So this question here, we're not, saying that the train should be built because so far our main vision of anti-displacement hasn't fully materialized. So we're not supporting the construction, but we do want to flex our imagination, I guess, and to be assertive about if we were to prepare to build a train through North Minneapolis, Robinson, Crystal, Brooklyn Park, what do we need to be fully prepared for that? So that's kind of like what this question is about. And I'm hoping that you can help share, again, around your own experiences, whether it's programs that could help getting people prepared, trainings, information. So again, this question, or just your experience, like what do you need to be prepared for what's coming if a train were to be built? So following our order here, I'm wondering if Candy, if you mind sharing a bit about, your experience as a resident. Y'all were preparing at Heritage and Harrison back in the day for the train. So I don't know if you want to share some of your insights around preparing with abundance.
Sure. I don't know if it was so much preparing with abundance. Well, maybe it was because we wanted to make sure that first of all, everyone was safe. We have over 800 kids on our property. And I remember, I got to share this story with you. When I was a kid, the city of Minneapolis decided to tear up the streets and put pipes, repair the pipes in the summertime. And we had mounds of dirt everywhere. And that's all we did all summer long is we played in the dirt. And I remember my mom, before she would let us in the house outside. And so I was thinking that way. When the train comes, first of all, I was thinking about pest control because there's going to be rats and bugs and stuff like that. And then, of course, for the people whose apartments overlook the expected train route, is to see if we could get some of the windows they gave to the people at the airport so that they would also not have to deal with the lights and the vibrations and the noise. And so we were trying to make sure that everybody was safe, could stay in their homes during construction, that the kids didn't mess with stuff and stuff didn't come up missing, and all those variables with that. And of course we want to have fun, so we want to make sure that all that was necessary.
Thank you, Candy. So then maybe we can jump to Jose and just ask you, again, given your experience and the work you've been doing and what you're seeing over here, what are some of those things that, like we need to, or that we can have in place to prepare for something like this?
Yeah, so I think just to build on what the others have shared, awareness and engagement is really critically important. A lot of times jurisdictions conduct minimal engagement. The engagement opportunities are not available to working people because they're sort of like on weekday afternoons. But the other thing that I would add is scoping mechanisms, and in terms of preparing it, and I guess to sort of answer the question, when we're talking about community members preparing, I think the way I would answer is like, how can they organize to make sure that they're being engaged properly in the process, and that whatever happens is actually to the benefit of the community, or with community consent, so to speak. You know, a lot of what Felicia is talking about in terms of taking advantage of the opportunities and the interest that already exists within the community for some improvements. And so I guess that's what I would suggest, is that there are ways for Hennepin County to conduct scoping studies and let the community know what's actually possible and how could this actually benefit the community. And there are ways to keep businesses whole during major construction projects like this. There obviously needs to be some kind of an investment, and you know, the question is, how can the community organize to secure these commitments from the jurisdiction before anything takes place, and really get a clear understanding of what the community, what the business owners want and need in that area. And I had one other example that I wanted to, again, share here really quickly. Sorry, I made a slide deck and it takes a second, but this is a different example in a different corridor project, but this is the kind of information that I think is beneficial to community members. Up in Duluth, there's been a lot of awareness from a volunteer group about a 1 mile stretch of I-35. And what they did was they partnered with the University of Minnesota in Duluth and created an advisory board that was made up of community members, and they sought some funding to conduct a study about the potential benefits and impacts. And you can do this in terms of how traffic is going to be impacted, how climate is going to be impacted, but also economic impacts. And then, you know, they're bringing this information back and into the community so they understand the scope of what's possible. And as you can see here, just 1 mile of converting something that's just for vehicles into more of a multimodal corridor can have a significantly positive impact on that project corridor. And then, of course, you know, it's things like housing anti-displacement and other community development benchmarks like land trusts or keeping public land public, and building accessible and affordable and adequate housing, and, you know, just keeping the communities whole. These benefits could go right back into the community. And instead of necessarily just preparing for harmful things to come, it's about, you know, creating opportunities, organizing around opportunities for prevention, but also seeking out opportunities to understand what the impacts could be, so that it's really an eyes wide open, conscious decision from the community before anything happens on the project corridor.
Excellent. And yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that as a clear example, Jose. And to throw some other numbers at you all, as far as I know today, what we know is that the Blue Line Extension project price tag continues to go up. And apparently right now it's at $2.5 billion. So for us, abundance here means that we have, you know, a mitigation package. We have a package of benefits that it's, you know, sizable, or that it relates to the size of the investment. We know that there's initiatives with the federal administration that are trying to build things back better. So for us, this could be an example on building trains differently. So with that being said, wondering if Karla, maybe you want to share a bit more about the question, and we do have it on the chat. I don't know if you want to share your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what's been said, that there needs to be awareness from renters to homeowners to business owners. Everyone in the community needs to know about the project. I even feel that the whole neighborhood needs to know, even if you're like a block away from the proposed route or where the route's going to be, if you're like a mile away. I think the whole neighborhood needs to know, because there are going to be businesses either that are going to get displaced or that are going to remain, depending on the resources that are available for business. Everyone just needs to know about this project, who it's going to impact. And I believe that one of the ways that we can combat this and this displacement that's going to be happening is for all the cities to adopt the policy recommendations that the anti-displacement work group has recommended. I think it's important because it covers everything from renters' rights to homeowners, to business owners. I believe it was before, during, and after construction. And we really need to prioritize those that have the most human impact with the lowest implementation cost. And again, these policies are gonna make it so residents are able to get that access to the resource to stay in their homes, regardless of status. I think that was one of the biggest policies I brought up in the work group as a member of it. Like, residents, in order to stay in their homes, they need to have that funding, whether if the rents are going to increase or buildings are going to get sold or homes are going to get sold if they're not owned by them. Well, how can we have that funding pool for them to get to own their home, to stay in their home, as well as for businesses? Like, what pool of money is available for them before, during, and after to make sure they're successful during the whole process, not just at the beginning, not just at the middle, but throughout the whole process.
Thank you, Karla. And before we go to Felicia, I'm sorry, kind of like broke my order there. I got distracted, but I just wanted to add, yeah, like, so to add to what Karla was saying, Blue Line Coalition and other community organizations were a part of an anti-displacement working group that Med Council and Hennepin County hired Cura to lead. And it seems like a report derived out of that effort will be live soon. And for us, it's important that the project adopts those recommendations and creates an implementation plan. But maybe we can talk more about that later. But Felicia, I'll pass it to you in regards, like, what do we need to prepare for the construction? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I think about this question a lot, and there's a lot that's needed even before. But so one big thing that I'll echo again is engagement. It needs to be done very heavily yesteryear, as well as today, tomorrow, ongoing. There's a lot that community needs to know and will learn from this project, this once in a lifetime project that will greatly impact our community. There needs to be, like, immediately way more transparency. I think that there needs to be investments right now, during and after construction. And the things we need to consider are our residents that are at risk for displacement. We also need to think, and those are our renters, right? Our folks who are already experiencing displacement or houselessness. And also there needs to be investments into their stability, because they're just not going to survive something like this. Things like this by design, those most vulnerable people. And one of the insights that was learned from the current work of the anti-displacement work group for this project is that the displacement impacts will happen much faster on this project than it did in the other one. So it will happen, and it will happen much faster. So we're at a greater risk with this project. So homeowners that are at risk for displacement, such as myself, the risk to their wealth building assets, which are their homes. There's potential damage from the construction, and like, there's always destruction before construction, y'all. Like, something's gotta like give and go in order to fit something like this into the neighborhood. So there's going to be a disruption in our lives and how we navigate the community. So there really needs to be investments in addressing those things right now. Like, also the environmental health risks. There needs to be research and investments now in mitigating that, preventing that, and managing that afterwards. Hearing Candy talk about as a child playing around in the dirt and all kinds of things really makes me think about how now, like, all these studies are out. We have like the highest health disparities. We got all the lead, we got all the asthma, we got all these things that are not inherently a people thing. It's not a cultural thing, right? These are things that have been done by design, and a lot that has to do with the negative health and wellness impacts in this community have been caused by development projects. Also, in thinking about how we have to live close to this development project as it's being constructed for a couple of years. Also, investments in the businesses across the community. The impacts of this is not just going to affect the businesses on West Broadway, y'all. It's going to affect businesses across North Minneapolis. It's already started impacting businesses and residents and homeowners in Harrison neighborhood. What makes them like, and it's not even going to go that way, right? So that, like I said, this stuff needed to happen yesteryear. Also, investments in the infrastructure, no matter what happens. Like with Harrison, they were expecting a lot of infrastructure investments that was going to make the neighborhood a lot safer to navigate for people who are walking, biking, and driving, right? And now that it's not even going to go that way, what happens with those investments, right? And how do we ensure that investments happen now? Because we're not going to get this until what, another 7-8 years? So for 7 and 8 years, we've got a continuance of, for instance, on West Broadway, that the electricity grid hasn't been updated in like 40 years, y'all. Like you can't plug in a couple generators without throwing half of the lights, and the lights aren't even on most of the time. I used to count them. Like at any given time, you might have at max like 20% of the lights on down the West Broadway corridor. And it's not because somebody's not turning on the switch, right? And so for 8 years, we gotta look at a dark, dank corridor at night. And that sort of thing. So those investments need to happen now, during, and after. The last things I'll try to wrap up quick is we need a plan. What's really important right now for this community is like all of these groups, organizations, experts, subject matter experts that are at these tables actually need to be developing a plan. There is just so much pushback at that I have experienced in these spaces, and people want to go back to the research, and I think that they can happen at the same time. I think we know that this is a very dangerous project if we are not prepared as a community. We've been saying this for a long time, so let's make a plan. Let's show us that you're for real about it. Let's make a plan and invest money and resources behind it. And that goes to Met Council, that goes to like all of those municipalities. It goes to our city, our county, and our state even. This is a huge development for the state, y'all. Like it's not, this is not a little thing, So yeah, there needs to be a plan, and it needs to be a strategy around both what the development needs to look like, but also how the community is being taken care of. Does a community benefits agreement exist? And why the heck not? So those are the type of things I think like in preparation of have to happen. And we also really think abundantly about this cannot be, y'all just do this for a year. Those engagement contracts that Hennepin County does for like 9 months or 10 months, that to me, that doesn't show a sustainable investment and value in the importance of that thing even happening, right? And so we must be thinking abundantly in how and I say demand, we demand these things as a community and a neighborhood because it's out there. It's out there. I've traveled to other cities and states where they will just invest $75 million into just the anti-displacement work. Right? And we're not even close to that. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll go through the next questions. Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you. And I hope you all are taking notes, because there's some truths being said in this room that, again, they don't just apply to this project, right? Because as Felicia was saying, like, it is a regional network of projects that keep putting pressure on us, on communities of color that have lived in these neighborhoods for decades, enduring scarcity and racist policies, right? So for us, yeah, we see the opportunity in like, we don't want to prepare to survive this development. We want to prepare to thrive. And where are the dollars being allocated to help us thrive? And if we don't see any money, then how can we give our consent, or how can we trust this process that we're being, led into? So, but yeah, so moving forward here, with this next question, and I know that Karla saw your question there, and I hope that we have some time at the end to cover that. But I guess the next question here is around, yeah, so it's kind of like the vision, right? So we talked about the current state of things, how can we prepare? And then this next part of the conversation is about what happens if they listen to us, right? So what happens if the project team adopts all of the anti-displacement recommendations, you know, kind of like starting to paint or to materialize the city that we see as a possibility of existing based on the actions from the leaders, right? So all that being said, I'm hoping, Candy, I know that since I met you, you very on had a very clear vision of what this training could be like. So I'm actually wondering if you could share a bit of that now, or whichever way you want to approach answering this vision of what happens if they listen to us.
Oh my goodness, if they listen to us, this train is going to be awesome. Because you guys all know I want a party train. I've been talking about a party train for I don't know how long, with a disco ball, you know, sponsored by Grey Goose or Patron, that has like some slot machines on it, that goes a destination stop. So I'm all about having fun and getting access and making sure, you know, community comes with me on this. Not only that, actually vibrating chairs at the platform and edible pots, plants on the platform. Also, what is it? During constructions, helicopter rides from a parking place, some zip lines in there somewhere to get people to and fro. I'm asking for the max. Like, if they go low, I'm going bigger. Because you can always ask for stuff, whether you get it or not. At least they're thinking about it, you know, and always at an asset management where it's like fun and exciting, and people, it seems like people get more excited about having more fun or more entertainment than they do with devastation. So I'm like, look, let's have some fun with this. Let's get the people what they want. Let's make sure we bring in the appropriate businesses, you know, like, let's see, what kind of, you know, like some, like a McDonald's with a playland in it for young families. What is it? A coffee shop that you can drive through. You know, and it has to, and it should be by, or, you know, people of color run and owned and operated. And we wanted to make sure that the train does not go through North Minneapolis, but there are destination stops where people can celebrate the people that live in North Minneapolis. Because it's all about celebrating, it's all about building business, it's all about having a good time, and it's celebrating the diversity of North Minneapolis. Because I think one of the things that I found interesting is I actually grew up in South Minneapolis, where we right around Lake Street with Target, Cub, and then when I moved over here, like 17 years ago, I was like, wait, I see people walking with food. Where they get that food? Everything closes at 2. There's no restaurants where you can sit down and have family, like a family restaurant that you can sit down in on the north side. And it's like, why do I got to go to Brooklyn Center or St. Louis Park? Why can't I sit down somewhere in North Minneapolis and have a nice fancy meal? What is going on here? So I just noticed the different. And when my grandmother lived on the north side, her groceries came to her. She didn't really have to go to a grocery store. All her stuff was like delivered. And I found that very fascinating. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's bring some of that back.
Thank you so much, Candy. And as a quick, just to add to that, so, you know, like it is true, like Candy really, like from day one, like the party train and the idea of like approaching, designing the train itself with joy and fun was out there. And it took me a second to really understand what Candy was saying, you know, but something that I thought was very interesting is down the road, I found that in Europe, obviously, like in one of those places where it's like the perfect transportation system that you can ever imagine and people don't ever drive, There on the train, they have like a car for adolescents who are after school hours. You know, when they leave school, they take the train to go home. And guess what? It's a party train. So it already exists in Europe. They have like a sofa and they have a TV and they have video games, and that's how kids use it, you know? So they already did it over there. Candy's thinking ahead of time. I personally agree that if we design this train not to get you know, like people from the suburbs to the city just to work, you know, that's extractive. The train needs to look and feel like also we want to use it, you know? So I just wanted to throw that extra commentary in there.
Right. Like some fun stuff, not those ugly New York trains where people are always fighting or whatever. We are Minnesotans. We have to develop something really cool here and really fun.
Thank you, Candy. I love it. So Jose, I want to maybe ask you about the same thing, right? So what happens if they listen to us? I know that you've been exploring a lot of like building back seats with also memorial and stuff. And I think like you'll have a very clear vision of what our cities could be if our elected leaders act. So I'm just curious if you won't mind sharing a little of that vision, perhaps that you'll.
Yeah, so Candy, super hard to follow. I appreciate all the awesome ideation. So I think that's where I would start, is that there is a way to do these kinds of infrastructure development projects after the community has had the opportunity to envision their own neighborhoods, and modeled after, you know, that kind of visioning that community members are doing for themselves. You know, the same kind of resources that are often put forth, like Felicia was talking about, for these like really expensive engagement projects, you know, could be put into gathering community members at their convenience and making sure that they understand what's possible when a reconstruction project happens, and sort of giving them the tools, sort of like a menu of like, what can you do when these kinds of things happen, and letting the community members have input over what a reconstructed area would look like. And also to build on what Kenny said in terms of the stops and redeveloping areas around the stops, you know, I think to talk about the last question and this question, it's like, we know that historically in the state of Minnesota, in the United States, basically all infrastructure projects of this sort have been utilized for disinvestment and segregation. And we know, for example, in the state of Minnesota, because of the prolific amount of racially restrictive covenants, communities were forced to live in these areas of high BIPOC concentrations that then were selected for destruction. And so when we're talking about disinvestment and sort of the devaluation of these communities, or the economic warehousing of these community members, you know, not only is it difficult, I live in the Hawthorne neighborhood, so I live closer to 26 in Lowry, but you know, it's difficult to get your groceries or have amenities nearby and have access to them. The idea of having walkable, accessible neighborhoods and amenities is super important, because if you think about the opposite, which is the areas in the Twin Cities and the state of Minnesota that benefited from these racial covenants, they're really well developed. You know, access to schools, access to pharmacies, access to clinics, access to grocery stores. The traffic noise is little to no existent. People live near lakes. They've enjoyed opportunities for generational wealth. And so I think a successful outcome here is, you know, transit stops and neighborhoods constructed around communities' imagination and ideation for the kinds of things that they'd like to see. But broadly speaking, is for the finished product and the transition into it to lead into the same kind of capital improvements and surrounding amenities that people, white people who lived in areas that were protected by racial covenants, have been enjoying for 2 or 3 generations here in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Jose. Appreciate that. And then Felicia, would you maybe mind sharing and use your own approach, obviously, as like what happens if they listen to us, or yeah, how would you take this question or answer it? Sorry.
Yes, I love this question. And I always love Candy's answer to that question, because I'm like, what Candy said, and then I'll raise you. So I think to echo some of the things that have already been said, what I envision if they listen to us and they listen to all of us is that the neighborhood would be more accessible, it'll be more safe, it'll be more healthy, whether you're walking, rolling on your bike. I like to be on my bike or my roller skates. And then I think that it would also have a very strong youth presence, a very strong youth influence, and a very strong youth ownership piece to that. And ownership, not just in things like in the ideas, in the plan, in this vision, in the strategy and the execution of that. Them like really feeling like this is their home as well, and they get to create the world they're gonna want to live in. I'm not riding this train in a few years. I want it to look nice how they want it to look, right? Also that it will reflect the neighborhood. And to me, I even think culturally, that's things like when this train is zooming through and stopping at a few places through our neighborhood, because we're a destination, that our faces are on that train, right? What would it look like to see, you know, our, you know, some of our community loves going, you know, past and being able to say, hey, you know, do you remember Elder Bill Cotman, you know, or things like that. I think it looks like us and it feels like us, and it feels like home and it feels safe. And it also unites the community versus dividing us. Like it physically freaking chops us down the gut, right? How does it become more of a lifeline for us versus kind of severing us? So it's going to unite us. It's going to bring us food. We're going to have edible landscapes, which to me is like living abundantly. Like growing food is abundance in action to me, which is why like I just grow things at home. Like I'll eat an avocado. Best believe I got 5 avocado plants growing in my house. You know why? Because one avocado tree, this seed will grow a tree that will yield all this fruit that you can eat, and then all these seeds within that fruit that you can grow what more trees, right? And so I think we'll get to live abundantly, like we will feel the abundance as the community. If they listen to us, we're also going to have those resources for our youth, also for our elders, so that they can live full, abundant lives. I'm sure they'll want to walk and rest on a bench in one of these like edible green spaces that we've gotten invested into our neighborhood. So it's thoughtful and intentional and not just grass. I think I said this before, but if they listen to us, it's going to be safe. It's going to feel safe. And it's not going to be because we're policed heavily. And they're going to be creative solutions to our safety will be invested in and implemented through this project. If they listen to us, if they listen to all of us, it will be part of a full neighborhood development plan that includes what's happening on our river, what's happening over there on Glenwood, y'all, what's happening over on Washington Avenue. Again, it's going to unite us and be part of a full plan of how we're transforming the neighborhood, and not just one piece of it, so that other people can have whatever it is they feel they get out of a project like this. And it'll have several stops within the neighborhood. They're going to just have to make it happen. No matter what they say, we think abundantly. There are so many places you can stop, and there's so much intention you can put around those stops, particularly when it comes to who rides our stops and our children and our schools that are along this route, and them being able to, at any time of day, safely get from wherever that school is to wherever that stop is, because they don't have a bus, right? We don't have a bus system for our schools right now. So that they can very safely get to these places, and the great programs and resources that this development project is going to bring into the neighborhood to support them. So I'll leave it there. I could go on, but yeah, thank you, Candy and Jose. And then what is Karla up next? What you want?
I want the same as Candy. I want that disco ball in the train. I've always, since Candy has said it, I want the disco ball on the train. I've like everyone has said, I wanted to feel like I belong there, that this is my train. This is for all of us. Like I'm seeing already in the neighborhood, just going down Broadway, like there's a mural on the building of Sammy's Avenue Eatery of this religious figure, the Virgin of Guadalupe. Like it just makes me feel at home. And I want that train to reflect all of us, to make it feel like home. And with and if they were to listen to us, they would also have like this funding for all residents, for all businesses, again, throughout the whole project to stay in their home, to stay in their community, and also have that assistance when I think in the last question, I said, like, they need to adopt these policies that's going to benefit the whole community. Again, if they listen to us, there needs to be the funding for those policies to support the businesses, to support residents, but also implement the policies and assist businesses and residents throughout. If there's like a resource for them to apply to stay in their home or to own their home or to invest in their business, there needs to be that technical assistance. So we make this our own, and the funding is like huge. As I mentioned, like there was only a handful of engagement done to the Latino community. I think I recall it was like 60 or so, but because of that support of that funding to organizations like Pueblos, like we have been able to connect more residents. We're connecting with the church in North Minneapolis. We now started connecting with St. Al's in Brooklyn Park. They're ready to join this fight to include the youth, like Felicia was saying, to make it their project, to say, this is what we want, and this is what I see down the long term. Because again, I wanted for my kids to ride. Before then, I recall my parents saying, like, we had to drive out to St. Paul just to get Latino products, Latino businesses. Well, we've heard already in North, like maybe including a restaurant, like Candy said, where families could come and eat, or along the proposed route. And that project, the Blue Line, I'm excited that's going to connect from North to Brooklyn, because there are already businesses in Crystal, in Robbinsdale, in Brooklyn Park that are Latino owned. Like I can get an ice cream in the summer from La Michoacana. I can go get some tacos at the taco place in Brooklyn Park. So even seeing more of that, more reflected of the community that's already present and the richness that exists. Like if they were to listen to us, it's going to be a whole multicultural party on the train, honestly.
Thank you, Karla. And I just want to again plug in the fact that for a year and a half and then 10 years before that, Blue Line Coalition has really been working hard to ensure that the voices of our communities don't go unheard when it comes to the planning and then construction of the Blue Line Extension project. And there's a report that's about to go live that highlights recommendations and investment strategies, so this vision of abundance that we're putting out there can become a reality. Because as you can tell right now, it's not, they're selling us this train wrong, right? Like the abundance exists. We know that it's out there and we know we deserve it, right? And it's time that we do. And I'll say this, I think you also heard during this conversation today that there's a clear way in which we want things to be done, that we see this vision. And I'm hoping that, you know, the Blue Line Extension elected leaders and the project team can understand and adapt their efforts given the historical importance of this project. As it was mentioned, this is once in a generation project. So we need to change our practices to ensure that the outcomes are different. If we don't see a guarantee that our vision can become true through this building this train, but that we're going to be heard by it, we cannot give our consent for this to take place under our watch. So I just wanted to add with that, please do be on the lookout for those recommendations that will come soon. And so we're going to cover all the questions, but given the size of the room and the fact that we still have some 10 minutes. I'm hoping that maybe we can do some quick questions and answers from the group. And I know that there was one already on the chat, but I think that was maybe answered by Karla already. But anyway, so this is the time when we ask you for any questions or comments. And if you panelists have anything else to add, please raise your hand. But let's take some questions from y'all. Unless we were so clear and revelatory to you that everything is now clear and you don't need to ask anything because.
Hi, Ricardo. I'd like to ask a question, and I phrased my question wrong. I think it's pretty evident that people are saying that the meetings that have been held both in the community and those public meetings that people are invited to attend are not performing due diligence. They are not inclusive, and they are not looking at a very broad view of what equity looks like in terms of development associated with the blue line. I think that's very clear. I think my question, and I left this word out and it's kind of critical, is why? Why is that happening? Why is there not, based on the current initiatives they are taking, why is this happening? Why does it look like this right now?
Sure, and so just to be clear, it's like around like why is there a scarcity today, right? Like as compared to not having access to that abundance. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but okay. So maybe we can even go around, with the same order that we've been using. Candy, I don't know if you caught that question. Oh, Martin, you have a question?
Yeah, Martin Hernandez. I live in Los Angeles now, but I lived in St. Paul for several years in 2017 to 2021. I sat on the City of St. Paul Transportation Committee. I lived on the West Side. I did transportation organizing here in Los Angeles when they were building the rail lines here and gutting the bus system that the majority of people use. I would just advise, be careful what you wish for. Government is not your friend. I've heard the phrase, if they listen to us, I've heard that several times. The reason, David's question, the reason that these are the way the things are run, because these projects are not for us, and they may throw a lot of things out for you to bring you into that project. But at the end of the day, what you're going to see is a lot of luxury housing. I've seen it along University Avenue. I see it here in Los Angeles around the rail stops. My niece was living in a low-income Latino community here in Los Angeles. Her landlord forced her out. She lives in Georgia because we come back and all the gentrification is going on because there's a rail line there. I was out of Los Angeles for 4.5 years, living in a working class neighborhood, Latino neighborhood here in East Los Angeles. We come back to the house we live in. I look around and said, where are all these white people coming from? When I sat on the St. Paul Transportation Committee board, while they were adding extra service for the white folks coming to the soccer games, they cut a line, part of the route in one of my lines in the West Side that ran right by a low-income housing area and low-income communities. During the Super Bowl, who could get on the train at that time? Only people with tickets. Transportation has been used to uphold white supremacy. Rail lines in Los Angeles were real estate developments to bring people from out in the suburbs into downtown. Once they made the money there, this is what these projects are really about. So I would be very, very careful. Government is not your friend.
And Mark, so really,
they're not listening to you because they don't have to, because we don't have the money to fight them like the developers do, who are getting the contracts and are paying off your city council people and paying out the people like that. I've been there. I saw it. I'm sitting here listening to all this, and I hope it doesn't work out the way. But as Ricardo said, historically, these projects are not meant. No, I think Jose was saying that historically these projects have done that. What makes you think historically this is going to change? I have yet to see it from Atlanta to New York, etc. I mean, I can go on and on, but I pray for you. I really pray for you because, yeah.
So this is really about, I think what you're saying is this is really about racism and greed. This is what I'm hearing?
So yeah, I mean, I think that thank you for your comments. And I mean, I think that through the call, like we heard some of that scarcity that we're facing, you know. But I'll throw it to the panelists though. Candy, any thoughts on what you're hearing? Any immediate reactions or thoughts on what you're hearing?
Well, for Martin, thank you. Please pray for us because we need all the support we can get. And one of the things that's most interesting is that there's now a new generation, because before they wouldn't even have considered the anti-displacement working group or team or anything like that. They would have just did this project and run right through us. But right now we have the listening ears, we have the people's voices, we have power where we have power of, I don't really want to say, well, maybe disruption. We have people who, you know, in this generation, in this climate, there's some extremists that people are kind of afraid of because they will go to the extremes of bombing stuff and dismantling stuff and setting stuff on fire if they don't get their way. So it is easier to, like, I don't know what some people say, the old church people say, talk to the devil, reason with the devil, get what you want and then get out, I guess. But right now we're looking for cooperation. I mean, and make sure our voices are heard in a peaceful manner. But then, like Malcolm X, you know, by any means necessary. And if you take people to the other side, things will get disrupted. But right now, we want to make sure that all voices are heard, that we get the amenities that we want, that we do the paperwork, like Felicia was saying. So we put stuff on paper that can be held accountable, and we find those systems and make sure that the voices are heard in this discussion.
Any other reaction from the panelists on this situation here? Jose, you would go next. Do you have anything to add here?
Sure, I can, if I could go after Jose.
Please do, absolutely.
Sure, I'll be quick. To David's specific question, I think it's correct to say that, and what Martin was saying, this is consistent with the history of infrastructure development and land use. You know, for example, when I'm a mapping prejudice project fellow, so I've been learning a lot about some of these connections that led to these spots in infrastructure development history, and concretely hearing and learning about how modern real estate business was basically modern day segregationist practice. You know, the whole industry was just kind of created around re-separating communities. And looking at the maps, or like in 1910, before racial covenants were put in place, Minneapolis was much more integrated than it is now. So we've been taking steps backwards. And through that concentration, it just makes it more easy to choose these communities for further destruction and further harm. And so it always kind of feels like, and I think rightly so, that the communities themselves are having to kind of catch up to the process as they become aware. You know, so I think what I would add in terms of, to say something very positive, you know, the city of Minneapolis is considering a resolution to finally turn over Olsen Highway from MnDOT to the city and start considering replacing it with something that serves the community. And a lot of that is the direct result of the massive amount of engagement that we've had to do. You know, we've been door knocking there consistently every other month since November of 2021. And so it just takes a lot of this kind of effort, but to combine scarcity and abundance, you know, part of that method of delivery was to say, here's what's happening, but looking at it as an obstacle to something that's plausible that could benefit the community, and us doing the work of creating the frameworks and the expectations that make it very approachable for someone at the door to say, okay, if I send an email here and I make a phone call, in support of this stuff, you guys are going to carry the workload, for the coalition and for organizers to really do the work of the policy research, creating those benchmarks, incentivizing positive visioning, but also full acknowledgement of past harms leveraged against a solution that actually helps repair them.
Thank you, Jose. Felicia?
Yeah, I appreciate that that insight, Jose, because one of the things I was going to say is yes, yes, that it's segregation by design. It's that's how the systems were built. They're doing what they were designed to do, type of thing. I also will say that as a Black woman, as a dark-skinned Black woman, also with Indigenous background, like not having hope is not an option for me. What I do know is, like Jose has said, I do, having lived here so long, I have seen the difference in that collective impact when we're organizing and when we're engaged and we're informed. And yeah, I'm at risk for displacement. I live about a block and a half away from where they're wanting to build this. I, as a resident here, haven't had much engagement. I just started getting mailers from Met Council about this project, maybe the end of last year. And prior to that, I served on the Business Advisory Committee and had been saying, hey, me and my neighbors haven't heard anything. Hey, there should be more engagement. Hey, there should be more money that goes to engagement. Hey, you should have these organizations doing engagement for young people because they don't know about it. Hey, like, so there's a part of me that believes and can see impact of that work, and also super aware that it's an amazingly difficult fight that has to be fought from various angles. As the employee of this particular organization, Partnership in Property Commercial Land Trust, I do think that there is great opportunity for partnership with organizations like mine. There's also a community land trust who has been doing what they do for even longer than my organization's been doing what we do. I think there's opportunity to really work with us in order to buy some of this land before it stays in this speculative space and the market does what it does. You know, our goal is to take it out of the speculative market and create, we put in an affordability investment with our business partners in order to make it affordable for them to purchase this. And then having wrapped into, like, you know, the community land trust, how does it get resold? How do we like maintain the affordability and sustainability of what we're doing here? Which is why I think a lot about like before, during, and after, like the investments and the resources and the strategy really needs to be rooted in that. Otherwise, like you said, like the market development does what it does. I'm studying development and development world much more than I would like by way of this particular job. But I've learned a heck of a lot about how these community benefits agreements, these neighborhood plans are really great leverage for making developers do what they need to do to invest in us, because they can't build it otherwise. Those things are enforceable legally too. So we can sue the city versus being like a back and forth where we think that because we're on this, what do they call them? These work groups that the city throws together with people that they tokenize a bunch of us on, take the intellectual property, have a press release, and then like literally it goes into oblivion, right? So as I'm learning from the development space, oh, you can't do this because this is in place. I'm like, oh crap, right? As a community, like we need to be doing that. Like Southwest, they're getting a lot of money because they had things in place and they had strategies and plans and organizing. And so these other neighborhoods are experiencing it different. So thinking abundantly, us benefiting exists, right? I know how it's happened historically, but historically, my Black ass would not even be in this space, all right? So I know that historically, and yet I in myself in this space today am a testament that history can be disrupted. And I believe that we do have the power collectively to do that. So I think it's some both, but I also want to reiterate to this group that like we also can. Yeah.
Thank you. And we are right at 12:30. So I think that that's a perfect closing statement. Thank you all so much for being here. Please do look for the follow-up from this and reach out to us. I'd love to talk to you, Martin, David, Tess, Gabby, Brandon, Kathy, Elaine, everyone about what's going on, because we need help. We need prayers, we need brains, we need the whole thing. But I do also believe in our power, and I do believe that that's what we're doing right here, right now. I hope you have a great weekend, and thank you all. See ya. Thank you, panelists. You did incredible.